And then this is a different day. And then this is a different day. And then this is a different day. And this is a different day. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And just everyone, none of these are doctored, none of these are adapted. All of them are just this page. So what we did is we took a collection of these and we put them on a wall in our house. And right next to this wall, you can look out and see the window and so you can look, winter, nope. And then we just sometimes just look and remind ourselves that although we're in the lament of winter, spring is coming. There is hope, there is days, there is sunshine, that we are in a series. And what that is to us is an incredible gift that I want to give you this week. It's the gift of mercy. Because here's what lament does, is it opens up the door for mercy. It puts our heart and our emotions and our minds and our thoughts and our actions resynced in such a time that we can see things as they are and we can discover the mercies of God, which are like sunrises. They're new every morning. They come fresh every day. And here's the thing I really want us to get. It's not that this will open us up for God to be merciful for us. It will actually change our perspective to see that his mercy has been with us all the way along. You see, this weekend we're going to be talking about mercy. We're going to be talking about wormwood to mercy. So what's wormwood? What wormwood is a biblical metaphor. It's a plant that when you eat it, it's horrible, it's bitter. If it gets put in water, the water becomes bitter. It is a terrible, horrible, most bitter kind of thing you can imagine, and it is a metaphor for bitterness. So when the Bible talks about wormwood, it's talking about the bitterness, and that became a metaphor for lament. It has a metaphor for going through that which is bitter and how very often that leads us to mercy. And what I want you to see today is this is the thing. Now, this is a bit of a complicated sentence, so I'm going to go through it slowly, but this is such a profound insight, and it will help you, allow you, one, to have the courage to enter into lament and to get the full benefit from lament. Because honestly, there is a way to do lament where you will get trapped in bitterness. You will get trapped in wormwood. And I'm going to show you how to prevent that from happening. And watch this. It says, lament opens the door to see and experience the mercy of God that has always been there, okay? We need to experience and receive the mercy of God so we do not lose our humanity and become something broken under the terrible weight of bitterness caused by the pain of this world. So understanding that this world has real, devastating, unthinkable loss and pain and difficult about it, and that in it. And when we experience that, there is a weight and there is a bitterness in that. And that bitterness, if we're trapped there, can break us and can undo us and leave us in a place where our humanity actually become degraded and our thoughts and our thinking gets twisted, and then our actions get invested in like things like despair and revenge and anger and brokenness. There's a way out of that, and the way out of that is the gift of mercy. The way to discover the path that would lead to mercy, which gives us things like hope and joy and peace in the most profound way. And I want to show you from the scripture today just what that looks like. Now I just want to remind you a little bit of where we've been at. Okay, we've been talking about this thing of lament. Now this is super important to understand how this thing of how mercy redeems lament and makes it something absolutely beautiful for you and in the heart of God, is to remember that we've been talking about trauma. And what we need to do when we're in trauma is we need to pay attention to our feelings, our thoughts, and our actions. That is to say, a lament, and if you've been reading the laments in the Bible, you're going to see that very often the person reading the lament is talking about what they're feeling and just, forsaken and alone and bitter and angry and frightened and all the things. And then often in the lament, they're talking about what they think. I think you have forsaken me. I think everyone is against me. I think I'm covered with shame. I think I will never have hope. And one of the things we've been saying, super important, is that when our feelings, are being fully expressed, they are exaggerated, they're huge, they're big, they're raw, it can warp our thinking so that from our thinking we create narratives. And we need to just assume that when we're in a time when we're processing pain and we're going through lament, the narratives we are creating are imprecise. It's not that sometimes they're imprecise, it's that almost always they're imprecise. They're inaccurate, they're not true, they're not in sync with the reality of the way things are. And here's the thing, is that from then, those narratives, we choose actions. We choose to understand the actions we've done, what has happened, and we tell a story about that, what we're doing, and what we could do. And here's what happens. When trauma is deep and is profound, our feelings and our thoughts and our actions, they become what's called disintegrated. That is to say, they break from each other, and we're feeling things we don't understand. Our thoughts are spinning, and we're saying things and thinking things that are just kind of out there, and our actions seem like out of our control. They can be self-destructive, they can be mean, they can be angry. I don't even know why I did that. When you're feeling that and saying that, it probably is an expression that there's a trauma and there's some deintegration that's going on. And what lament does, it allows you to pull in what you're feeling, pull in what you're thinking, look at how you're acting, what happened, what were your actions then, and what you could do, and bring it together in a song, a poem, an expression, and look at it, let blah, blah, all out of there with exaggeration and metaphor and extremes so that it can all settle down, reconnect itself, and then you start feeling things, thinking things, and figuring out how to act in a much more controlled way. You see, one of the reasons people don't want to do lament is they're afraid. They think, listen, that lament, it can't be good, because if I get that close to my pain, I will get lost in it. I will get swept away in it. And here's the deal. The opposite is actually true. You must go through the bitterness, the wormwood of lament, to be honest about what I've experienced, be honest about how I feel about it and what I'm thinking about it and just how painful it was. I've got to be honest about that so that I can get to the point that I can see it separate and I can find a path better where things just settle down. Now, in order to do that, and this is so important to understand this step in terms of the path towards mercy. And this is what chapter 3 is all about. You've got to name the pain and assign the metaphor. So this is the beginning of deep lament, where you come and you start by naming the pain. And understand that naming the pain is an issue of your mental thought process. And very often I've heard people just say, well, tell me it happened. Well, this happened, and then I grew up like this, and this happened, or this loss, or the accident was like this, or the diagnosis came, and I was there, and it was terrible, and this and that. And it's amazing how often people will describe to me and to others some deepest, most painful things in the human story dispassionately. And very often what I've done, and I've seen many times, and it's an incredible reintegration of thought and feeling, is I'll say to someone, well, take what you just described to me and tell me what it felt like. And I'll even say assign a metaphor to it. So what do we mean when we say assign a metaphor to it? Assign a metaphor means what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, it was like a wave crashed over me. It was like a weight came on me. It was like I was sucker punched. It was like all my teeth were knocked out. It was like I broke my leg. It was like I was trapped. It was like I was entombed. It was like I died. It was just like, and it's amazing how many times when people name the pain and then they assign a metaphor for it, it's amazing how many times you've seen it. They say, well, it was like I got sucker punched, and there's a pause, and the emotion comes, and the emotion and the thought reintegrate, and they're able to process it. See, that's what lament does. And that's why it's so important to learn to do lament, whether you do a journal, or read a song, or read a poem, or you read one of the scriptures, and you say, that's like a lament for me. This is what I'm experiencing it. It allows you to feel that, express that, say that. And again, what we've said about lament is that it's okay if it's extreme. In fact, it's got to be extreme. It's not about right thinking, it's about what I'm thinking. And it's about exaggeration. And it's about, being able to not only exaggerate, but even accuse that I'm lamenting the fact that I did these actions and they led to this terrible thing, and I'm just the worst person in the world, and all these kinds of things. Or this thing was done to me by these selfish people who did this, and they abused me, or they hurt me, and this is what I did. Or God, you let this happen, and you let me down, and all these kinds of things. And here's the deal. Many times people will think that I can't do that, I can't say that, I can't say those things about God, because if I do, it's just not appropriate. But here's what we need to understand. It is a greater level of trust to lament than not to lament. So the person who said, I could never say that about God, doesn't trust the love and mercy of God. The person who laments says, God, I'm going to say some horrible things, some terrible things. I'm going to accuse, I'm going to scream, I'm going to say things that I don't really think, what I really believe, but this is what I feel, and I'm going to say them to you, and I'm going to trust that in the midst of that, your mercy will keep me, hold me, and you're going to keep loving me because you're good, in spite of the fact that this is what's coming at you right now. I'm going to be unfair to you, God. I'm going to be accusatory to you, God, in such a way that I just got to say this. And again, this process allows us to be free. This process allows us to express it in such a way that we can get back to a point that we can rediscover the mercies of God that has always been there. So in this next passage of Scripture, we're going to see all kinds of metaphors. We don't have time to look at them all, but several metaphors that the writer of Lamentations in chapter 3 says. He says, God, you have used a rod of wrath on me. So you've hit me with a stick. My flesh and skin waste away. My bones are broken. You have besieged me. I dwell in darkness. I'm like I'm dead. You've walled me in and trapped me. You've buried me in heavy chains. Look at some of these scriptures and notice how many, metaphor after metaphor after metaphor. Because what metaphor does is this is the glory of metaphor. It at once is a very accurate description of what I'm thinking and feeling, but it also horribly imprecise. So it matches my emotions and my thought, and it brings them together. Okay? Look at the metaphors. Look at the things that they assign. He says, he has walled me up so that I cannot escape. And so I'm trapped. He has made my chains heavy, and it's a picture that I feel chained. Though I call and cry out for help, he shuts out my prayers. He has blocked my ways with blocks of stone. So he keeps putting obstacles in front of me. He has made my path crooked. I'm trying to walk this way, and he's leading me over here, and over here, and over here, and over here. These are all metaphors that express thoughts and feelings that need a symbol to express them. He is a bear. Look at this. A bear lying in wait for me, a lion hiding. He has turned aside my steps and torn me to pieces. He has made me desolate. And so it's like I was just taking a walk and you were like a bear that ripped me up or a lion that ripped me up. I just feel torn to shreds. And full of that, all of us can say, I kind of know how that feels. I understand that. The other thing a metaphor does is it helps you connect with other people who say, yes, that's how I felt. I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I couldn't say it, but saying that helps me understand what you're feeling, what you're thinking, had the same kind of experience. He says, he has bent the bow and set me as a target arrow. He drove into my kidneys the arrow of the quiver. And so in the ancient world, that's a death sentence. So if you get an arrow through your inner organs, your kidneys, they would have called the whole thing kidneys. It's like, okay, no penicillin. How are we going to get that arrow out? Internal bleeding, slow, painful, infected death. Says, that's how it feels, how you've treated me, God. This is what you've done. Okay? And so you feel the weight of the emotion. And again, can I say those things to God? God can handle it. In fact, I want to suggest he delights that you would trust him that much to express your deepest feelings and emotions to him. That's the goodness of God. He can handle it. He's calling you to it. It's an act of prayer and worship. Now, let me show you. All that bitterness we just looked at, the wormwood. So again, wormwood is the word that means bitterness. It's a metaphor for bitterness. Opens the door to mercy. And again, we must have mercy. Mercy is the calling out to God, understanding whether or not my lament is what I've done, the harvest that I've planted that I'm sowing, what someone has done to me because of their selfishness and their abuse and their cruelty, or whether or not just because I got a diagnosis or life happened or whatever. Doesn't matter. No matter what do I need to get through it? I need the mercy of God. I need the mercy of God. So we're going to see this. Mercy opening up the door to wormwood. Look at it again. Verse 14, chapter 3. I have become a laughingstock of all the people. This is the bitterness. And again, notice again how he talks about this thing of how often verses like this come up where he's talking about, in essence, embarrassment. And for many people, that's the worst thing about trauma, is that no one wants to feel like a victim. No one wants to feel like I've been taken advantage of. I'm small, I'm a loser, I've messed up. people did this to me. It's embarrassing. And many people won't get close to their pain because they're embarrassed. And that's one of the things that'll keep people from processing lament. It'll also keep people from turning to God. I'll say more about that in a minute. I become a laughingstock of all the people, the object of their taunts all day long. He has filled me, look at this, with bitterness. He has satiated me or drowned me with wormwood. He says, bitterness is what I'm experiencing. Now, here's the thing you need to understand about the whole book of Lamentations. You would expect Lamentations to start really low. Oh, it's so bad, it's horrible. And then get good, and then end. Not so much. So what Lamentation does is it starts really low. It goes to chapter 3. Chapter 3 turns a high point, and then chapter 4 and 5 go right back down. And I think that what that tells us and what it gives us permission to understand is that lament, grief, loss, trauma is not linear. That is to say, it comes and it goes. You have good days, you have bad days. You go up, you go down. You go over, you go out. And some days you wake up and say, pretty good. And the next day you don't understand. I'm completely overwhelmed by this. And so that's just kind of the nature of it. But watch the wormwood. Look what he says. He, God, he has made my teeth grind on gravel. There's a metaphor, right? Just a horrible picture. And made me cower in ashes. The metaphor of ashes is a super common metaphor in the Bible. In fact, it's one in Christian circles. And the whole idea is that I had this thing and I loved it. It was great. It burned to the ground and all that's left is ashes. It's a metaphor for loss or for death or for grief. And now I'm covered in ashes because everything I cared about was lost. And so this is, again, the bitterness. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what his happiness is. So I say, my endurance is passionate. I can't keep perished. I can't keep going. So as my hope from the Lord. So I don't have endurance. I don't have hope. And this is the psalmist in bitterness, expressing what they feel, how they're thinking, and what their experience in action is like living. And so all of that is this lament. It's been 2.5 chapters of this pouring out to God, and this honesty before God, this trusting the goodness and the faithfulness of God enough to be this real with God has opened up the door for mercy. Now this next passage, it's just one of the most beautiful passages in the scripture, and it's the basis for perhaps certainly one of the most loved songs in all of Christianity. And see if you can see the song. We're actually going to sing the song later, but see if you can see it. This is where mercy comes. It's the first part. Remember my afflictions, my wanderings, my wormwood, and my gall. So he calls God, see this. I need to be seen. I need you to know. My soul continually remembers it, and it is bowed down within me. And here's the turn. I call to mind. But this, he says, I call to mind. Okay, now he's vomited out all the thinking that's imprecise, the feelings that are out of control, the actions that were just out of control and not clear. He's vomited all that out. And now you're going to see, he can see things clearly. He can feel things clearly. He can make a plan about actions going forward. Watch this. But this I call to mind. Thinking. Therefore I have hope. A minute ago he just said he didn't have hope. Expressing the loss of hope is one of the keys to finding hope. Okay? It's so counterintuitive. We think, again, if I do lament, I'm going to get lost in bitterness. Lament is the key to not getting lost in bitterness, denying the pain. That's where you get lost in lament. That's where you get lost in the bitterness. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. So he calls to mind that God is a God of love, and he's never been a moment that he did not love me. In the midst of everything that happened, there's never been a time where he did not love me. His mercies, look at this, never come to an end. It's not like there's one sunrise. There's a sunrise every day. His mercies are new every morning. His mercies come by the millions. We just don't see them. We just don't experience them. His mercies never come to an end. Look at this. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. That in the midst of this, God, you have been faithful. Now, you've been faithful to judge sin, but that same faithfulness is going to be faithful to redeem and bring salvation and bring hope. I count in your goodness and your faithfulness. He's only able to access this because he's done 2.5 chapters of lamenting. The Lord is my portion. That's a way of saying, you know what? I've lost a lot, but I got God. He is what I got. The whole world may be ashes, but I have God, and he is not going to leave me or forsakes me. He says to my soul, therefore, I will have hope in him. I remember when this started happening to me. I've been sharing with you that 10, 12 years ago, I had a deep wall. I had a deep time of despair and depression. I had deaths in my families. I had unhealthy behaviors in my own life. It was just a terrible time with panic attacks. And literally, I was in the other venue. If you're in the theater this morning, I was in the middle of a sermon, and I couldn't think, I couldn't feel, I couldn't talk. And I just went over to the side of the stage, and I just sat down in the middle of a sermon. And it was just, everybody in the room was thinking, is this part of the sermon? And it was, I just couldn't go on. And I remember somehow or another, I got through the end of that service. I basically said to the song leader, we have communion, you do communion. And then I went out, and I literally, in backstage, laid on the concrete in the backstage. I mean, they brought me to the hospital. I mean, it was just one of those deals like, what has happened? This is Paul. Paul always has it together. What's going on? And it was just a beginning of like a 6-month to a year process of seeking help and getting therapy. And I remember in the midst of this, I had to go through just months and weeks of wormwood and bitterness and processing and meeting with my therapist. It became this most wonderful thing and the most horrible thing. And the thing that surprised me about it is that in the midst of it, all the mercies that I found. I will say this, in that I understood what hope was. I remember one of the first days where I realized, I woke up and said, I feel pretty good today. I feel optimistic about the future. And I remember the day that I felt the steadfast love of the Lord. We were riding back from a therapy appointment, and for me, my therapy appointments were just exhausted. I had to sleep the whole next day because we just did some hard work. And I was sitting in the car, and we're listening to music, and I remember my wife was driving because I just wasn't in a place to drive. That's where I was at. And I just felt the overwhelming, crushing love of God. I have never before or never since felt such perfect love as that. In the midst of that, his steadfast love, that mercy was given to me as I was processing, as I was lamenting. I started understanding his mercies new every day. I started understanding that I was on a pathway of thinking the success I was having was about me, and that I was actually being super selfish, and I was not a compassionate pastor, and that I was going to learn through pain what it means to love those who are hurting. There were a million lessons, a million things, mercies that God gave me in the midst of this. More than anything else, I learned that the Lord is my portion. That if God took everything away, if all of you went, and church went away, and even my wife and my children went away, God is with me. And he has always been with me. I remember one particular time in meditation through my journal, I actually, because my therapist made me, she was a wonderful, horrible person, and I was writing what happened. I was just telling exactly what happened to get close to it. And as I was, the Spirit of God just had me start to imagine that as I was sitting on that stage, embarrassed and overwhelmed and just a wreck of myself, Jesus was sitting next to me. And when I was backstage laying on that cold concrete, he was sitting next to me. And in the hospital that afternoon, when I was in one of those machines when they were running some kind of test and I had a panic attack inside the machine, he was holding my hand. And in those dark days where I was in my room and I didn't know what I was going to do, he was with me. And that I was never alone. And that he was always my portion. And the steadfast love of the Lord never ended. See, you learn all these mercies when you honestly lament. You know, one of the things my therapist said, I was actually going to say this several weeks ago in a sermon, and the Spirit of God just stopped me and said, don't say this. Folks aren't ready to hear this yet, but I'm supposed to say it today. I really think this. And she said this to me. She said, you know, Paul, as I started making some progress, started experiencing some healing, and started coming to terms with what anxiety was doing, and just learning to lament the loss of so much, and just my part and the part that was done to me and childhood stuff. It was just powerful stuff. And I'm here. And she said, you know, Paul, what a lot of people have learned about this thing of anxiety that you're learning from right now is that they've learned to make it a friend. And this is what they have told me. A lot of people feel like that friend never goes away. And I thought, why am I paying you? That is all I want, for this to go away. Fix me. I will take a pill. I will stand on my head, make it go away. And she said, what you're not understanding is that the friend who comes, and what I've discovered, it's not a good friend, but it's a really important friend, because your friend anxiety, your friend trauma, your friend pain, your friend lament, that season of the gray comes. It comes unannounced, uninvited. It stays longer than you want and won't leave when asked. But that friend comes with a message from God that you can only hear from that friend. And until you learn to listen to it through lament, through honest process of brokenness, it's not going to go away. It will just deepen. That lament, it'll just say, I got all day. I just hang out, okay? And until you do, and then what happens is there are days they're not in the room, but she said it'll be like they're walking in a far distance, and every now and again they will come walk in your life. He said, but you'll learn now how to listen, and it won't be a trauma or a terror. It'll be okay. I need to slow down. I need to pay attention to what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. I need to get some community around me. And that will be actually the place where you learn some of your most deep things. You will experience the love of God most profoundly. You will understand what mercy is most profoundly. It'll be that most healing place. This is what I discovered when I learned to honestly lament. It then also helps you to learn to wait. That the Lord is good to those who wait for him, the soul who seeks him, that maybe I'm going to be in this for a season, but it will not be forever. There is sunshine and shadow. I remember one of the first days after that long season of just feeling anxious all the time, I had a whole day and I realized at the end of it, I didn't feel bad all day. I actually felt good today. I was so surprised that light and hope and sunshine had come back into my life. The Lord is good to those who wait, the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord, because that's one of the things trauma and pain will do. It'll slow you down. It'll make you quiet so you can hear and listen to God, what's going on inside of you, make sense of things, so much wisdom. For the salvation of the Lord, salvation not just from salvation from sin so you can go to heaven someday, but salvation from your brokenness and your smallness and your selfishness and your pettiness and your past pain. He would save you from all of that. He says it is good for a person that he bears the yoke when he's young. So we go through things younger as an investment in the work we have to do in the future. It makes us the kind of people who are qualified to go through life, who understand when other people talk about pain, you say, yeah, I know. I've tasted that. I've been there. I understand. We learn to wait on the Lord. More than that, we understand God's heart. Look at this. He says, for the Lord, this is one of the things he's learning now, the mercies he's discovering. The Lord will not cast us off forever. I know I've been saying that he's forsaken me forever. He's never going to forgive. It's hopeless. But now I know that's not true. And so he's becoming more reasonable in his feeling and his thought. But though he causes me grief, there is grief, and there's a tender grief he will cause me. Because there's work that only comes through that kind of brokenness. He will have compassion. He will feel, you know the word compassion means? He will suffer with me. He will feel it with me according to the abundance of his steadfast love, because he has never stopped loving me. And there's nothing he could do or I could do to make him love me more or less. For he does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of men. So he's not trying to do this because his heart is to be mean or enjoys punishing me or he's picking on me, which is exactly what he said in the first part of this lament. You just must be mean, God. But he's coming now to his senses through bitterness, through the lament. And he's now able to examine what his actions are going to do. He then says, let us now, because we're in a better frame of mind, a better emotional life, to examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us lift up the hearts and hands to God. And so to return to holiness and to worship. We have transgressed and rebelled, and you have not forgiven. Or it seems like you have not forgiven, but we haven't. And what it literally says here is we are not living in the full advantage of your forgiven. A lament allows us to do that. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called you, and you said, do not fear. And do you see the radical turnaround, the transformation that took place that allowed him to say, you know what? I've discovered, because I was honestly able to lament, express my thoughts, feelings, just my actions, and it was wild, it was out of control, it was just blah. And now I'm looking and I'm thinking clearer, and my emotions are better. And now I'm able to see actions that will lead to a better place, a better way of thinking, because I've been honest about the pain that has been part of my life. And I hear you saying, I don't need to live in fear all the time. I hear you that you do hear my cry, and ultimately it leads to him redeeming our life. Look at this. You have taken up my cause, O Lord, and you have redeemed my life. That is to say, you took that which was broken and you made it into something whole. You brought salvation to every aspect of my life, not just positionally forgiving me so I can go to heaven someday, but you're saving my thinking and my emotions and my actions. You're transforming me into something strong and beautiful and good that only comes through wormwood, the bitterness that causes us to experience the mercies of God, the millions and millions of mercies that are there, that are being poured out on us, even when we can't see them, the grace and the goodness and the love of God that's so impossible to see in the midst of the trauma and the pain. This is a cry for mercy. Now, this morning, we're going to have a lament. And what we're going to do is we're going to have communion. Communion is a lament. I mean, every time we do communion, we remember an unfair, unjust, horrible, terrible death. We discuss, we think, we meditate on, we draw near to the trauma of God in the person of Jesus Christ. And so this is a drawing near to the God who did not look down and say, boy, it must be terrible being down there. But the God who stepped in and came down and understood hunger and tears and thirst and injustice and pain and physical pain. This is the God who stepped into our story. This is a remembrance that we have a God who loved us so much that in order to bring good, he was able to take the bitterness, the wormwood of the cross. He was able to take that and allow his body to be broken. He was allowed to have his life poured out so that we might have life. And when we have communion, we draw close to that. We get in that. And it reminds us of our own sin and our brokenness, and it teaches us to grieve it so that we could leave it behind. It reminds us of the pain and injustice and the selfishness and the harm that may have been done by others to us. And we rely on, we see in that a pathway to unite us with Christ, who also experienced that kind of bitterness. It reminds us of the injustice and the pain in this world that has not yet been fully redeemed, and it renews our heart for justice and truth and love. So when we draw close to the cross through communion, we are entering into a lament. We are entering into the bitterness that we might come through and see the mercy that the cross provides us salvation. It provides us a pathway to be united with Christ. It provides us with strength and courage to face the injustice and the difficulty and the brokenness of this world. And so we are reminded of everything Christ is. Now, at the heart of this thing of communion is mercy. And here's the thing about mercy. Now, you need mercy no matter what kind of lament you're doing. You may be here and you may say, I'm doing a lament because I have planted a harvest, I am reaping that harvest, I have messed up, I have sinned, I need God's mercy. That's easy to see. But listen, if you're here and you are here and you're lamenting because someone did something terrible to you, selfishly, abusive, because of their own brokenness, their own pain, and you have been hurt, you know what you need? You need God's mercy. You need his strength, his courage, him to mercifully redeem you. Maybe you're here because you just life happened. Diagnosis, lost job, kids, whatever it is, and you're just overwhelmed. You're lamenting something that has turned to ashes. You know what you need? You need God's mercy. And so communion is a call to God's mercy. So there's a part of the liturgy of the ancient church called the Kyrie. So the Kyrie was a part. Some of you grew up in a traditional church that has what's called a liturgy. That's pretty much where they say the same thing every week. And you're wondering, why are we doing this? You should have listened better because there's some cool stuff there. But here's the deal. The Kyrie is actually in the liturgy. It is the only part of the liturgy that is not in Latin originally. It's in Greek. And what does that tell us? Well, the original language of the church was Greek. It tells us it's the oldest part of the liturgy. It's something that the early Christians, what the Kyrie simply means is, Lord, have mercy. It's that part in the liturgy where people say, the leader says, Lord, have mercy, and all the people say, Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. And all the people say, Christ, have mercy. And then he says again, Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. And for me, whenever I'm part of a liturgy, and I actually do a personal liturgy every day as part of my spiritual practice, that part of mercy, sometimes I do it 5, 6, 7, 10 times. Because I just say, what am I going to need for this day? I need your mercy. God, this situation is impossible with one of my kids. I don't know what to do. Lord, have mercy. God, this diagnosis came, and this person I love and I count on, oh my gosh, Lord, have mercy. God, I have sinned. I did that same thing I keep doing again. Why did I do that again? Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. It is a call for the mercies of God. It's born from the Lamentations. This incredible part of Lamentations that says all the lamenting and then says, but I will call to mind. The steadfast of the Lord endures forever. The mercies are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. It's a reminder of my soul that not only do I desperately need mercy, but mercy is available in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, let me just give you this, okay, before we do communion. There will be one thing that will keep you from discovering the mercy of God. One thing that will cause you to instead embrace bitterness and get lost in the wormwood of bitterness. And the simple thing, and it's the current spirit of the age, it's pride. It's saying, you know what? You're right, Paul. All this Lamentations are right. This has happened, it's wrong, it's broken, and I'm broken, and the world's broken, and they did this, and this is horrible, and you know what? There's nothing we can do about it, and I have earned the right to this prideful bitterness. I'm just gonna hold on to it, it's mine. And bitterness can be comforting. It can be a sense of entitlement, and from this bitterness, I'm going to embrace despair and anger. I'm going to be a bitter person. I'm going to seek things like revenge and penalty and punishment. I'm going to get my pound of flesh because this is mine. That's the deepest kind of pride. Because the person who recognizes, oh my gosh, that is all true. And I do not want to become that broken person. I don't want to lose my humanity in that wormwood. And so what I need to say, whether or not that lament is something I caused or someone else caused or it's just life, I need, Lord, have mercy. I can't handle this. There's nothing I can do. Too complicated. Christ, have mercy. I did it. They did it. Life happened. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. And so communion is a call to have mercy. And so what I want you to do, I'm going to go ahead and invite the ushers to come forward to prepare communion. And as they do, I'm going to just encourage you to just close your eyes for a minute. And I just want to encourage us to just take a moment to seek the mercy of God through lament. And so I want you to just, honestly, just for just a few seconds, be honest about what you're feeling today. You're feeling annoyed, you're feeling angry, you're feeling afraid or alone, you're feeling overwhelmed. Do you feel just broken? Don't judge it, don't push it away, don't try to fix it. Don't try to talk yourself out of it, just feel it. And just for a moment, in the midst of that, try to pay attention to how you've been thinking, the story, the narrative you've been telling yourself that it's hopeless, that I'll never change, that everyone is against me, that it's just not right, it's just not fair, that God has forsaken me. What story have you been telling yourself on an emotional level? And then from that, what actions have come? Are you just giving up? Are you turning cynical? Are you turning bitter? Just don't judge it, don't try to fix it, just acknowledge it. Just let yourself feel that. And in the midst of that, just look at that big ball of brokenness and honesty and lament and grieve it. Doesn't matter if you caused it, something else caused it, it just happened, or some combination of all of it. Just see it. And in the midst of that, let's call out for mercy. Father, we have sinned and we have planted seeds that have reaped a harvest, and things are messed up by our own hand. Lord, have mercy. Father, things have been done to us. People who are selfish and small hurt us, and they hurt us over and over again. And there's been pain and there's been injustice, and this has happened. Lord, have mercy. Lord, the life, it's ashes. What I thought, what I wanted, what I dreamed, the diagnosis, the job, the person who I thought was going to be there is not there. It just happened. Lord, have mercy. Father, there's deep injustice in this world. People who at this moment are suffering, and why is it like that? Why is it like that? Lord, have mercy. Just respond. Repeat what I say. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. And once again, Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. I want to let you know that here at Jacob's Well, we don't have a lot of rules about communion. We actually don't believe that anything mystical or magical happens to the bread and the elements. We think the really important thing happened 2,000 years ago when Jesus Christ died on the cross, and that we put our faith and trust in his act of sacrifice to bring us mercy, not only to prepare us and create a place for us for heaven someday, but to begin to change for us, to totally redeem us inside and out, our thinking, our actions, our heart, the way we treat each other. And we're in this journey of being transformed by Christ. All of it comes through the mercy and the power of Christ through the cross. And so we put our full faith and trust in what Jesus Christ did on the cross. That's what we remember. The bread symbolizes his body. The cup symbolizes his blood that was poured out, his life that was poured out. And so we come to remember that, to draw close to that, to bond with Christ, to leave our sins behind, to bring our brokenness, become real and raw and honest as we come to the one who on the cross said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Even Jesus had his great lament. And so when we come, we just come as we are. So we don't have a lot of rules. So if you just are a follower of Jesus Christ, a believer in Jesus Christ, believer in his cross, you are welcome to come to communion. Doesn't matter what kind of church you go to or if you're just visiting. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you're welcome to come have communion with us as an act of lament, an act of just honestly drawing near to the brokenness in ourselves and this world and Christ, bonding with him, renewing our faith in him as we take it. So the ushers will dismiss you by row. Everything's gluten-free, so you're all safe in that. There's no gluten up here at all, and so we want everyone to be able to participate. If you can't get up, some of the ushers will have trays that they will have in their hands that if you don't want to come forward, they'll dismiss you by rows. Just come. You can take the elements and take them right away up front, or you can go back and seat in your chair. But wherever you're at in your journey, we invite you to come to communion, to seek the mercy of God and the love of God. I do want to say just simply this. The song we're about to sing is born from Lamentations, and it is a heart song for many of us. It is a song that just we know and we love. Maybe we never understood why we didn't understand why we knew and love it. We know and love it because it could only be born from the pain of the book of Lamentations. It was born from lament, and it's this most beautiful song that speaks to our hearts. And we'll be singing it as we have communion. And I invite you now to come to communion.